Welcome back to the Roscoe Powder Coater Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Scott, and in this episode, we're going to tackle pricing, knowing what you're worth. Aside from learning powder coating, this has got to be one of the hardest things to get confident with. Are you frustrated with losing money by underbidding? How much does it cost you to do a job? What are those costs? How can you cost a job properly when they're all different? What are the best methods to pricing? My approach to this subject is both technical and practical. First, an interview with Terry Peterson, who has over 40 years experience in the powder coating business. He has seen it all. In the second half, it will be Ross Scott, owner of Maui Powder Works, who has a very no-stress method to his estimating. Stick around to hear all the ways they do it to determine the best way for you. Get ready to level up your powder coater game. Now, let's introduce our first guest, Terry Peterson. Hi, Terry. Thanks for being on the show today.
Hi, Kim. It's great to be here.
This topic of pricing just doesn't seem to go away. It seems like the most quality custom coaters that I talk with out there are humble, honest, hardworking people. So if you're good, shouldn't you get paid what you're worth?
Well, I mean, in essence, you're right, Kim. And there are different levels of coders that are out there. Some are very meticulous about what they do, and some are just out there coding. You've got hobbyists, and you have people that are, really striving to create a lifelong business and provide for their family and make a name for themselves. And I think most powder coaters are pretty artsy in their backgrounds. I know I was when I started my business a number of years ago, and I've always wanted to do the best for the customers. But the pricing, it is a question that keeps popping up. You see it time and time again on the internet, and I do have people ask me about it from time to time. You bet.
So why do you think coders struggle with it? Is it just a confidence game?
Well, some of it I think is. I think some coders, and I know certainly when I started out, and I'll reference a lot of what I did in the beginning. When we start out with the biggest shop, the best equipment, and you're trying to garner, as much as you can for your product. And once you kind of get past that fallacy, and you're working more of what we were just talking about a few minutes ago about quality and building a clientele. Then you start working down to the grassroots of how you're going to charge for your for your services. And you know what? I think the basic menu for anybody is you've got to figure out how much everything's costing you, and that includes your energy cost. How much did you pay for your oven? How much did you pay for your other equipment? How much is your time worth? How much is the powder that's going on to the items that you're doing, and how much time are you spending prepping it? And those are pretty much the basic, questions that you need to ask, and just put it down on paper. And sometimes you'll surprise yourself as to how much it's actually costing you.
Right.
And you're realizing, well, I'm not charging enough. Plus, there's always the good old method of how much are my competitors charging? And then
Right.
you kind of work your system backwards and say, okay, if they're charging this, can I get away with that? Or how can I make my process more efficient to make what I need to make on it so I can have a profit?
I do want to go there. And I think before we get going much further, I want to go back up a little bit and kind of give us your background. How did you get started? And, how did you learn all this stuff?
Yeah, how did I learn it all? That's a funny question. I have people ask me this all the time, and I usually give my consulting customers a brief history of where I've come from, so they feel comfortable with who they have coming into their shops. But anyway, about 30 years ago, I was in the paint contracting business, had a fairly large business going, and I heard about this new powder coating process, this new way to coat metal items. So being dumb, like most people are when they first start out doing something new, I just went out and found somebody who had a used oven, and had a hard time finding somebody with a powder gun, but I did. I was lucky enough to come across somebody, and I bought the equipment. And funny thing is the oven was put in, it was installed, and a couple of days later, the gentleman that I purchased my gun from came in, dropped it off with a small bag of clear, and said, "Okay, here you go. Goodbye." And I went, "Well, wait a minute. What am I doing with this thing?" And so he kind of gave me a brief. "Well, here's what you do. You put the powder here, you shoot it. It sticks to things. You throw it in the oven, you're done." And I thought, "Hey, this is great."
How
So I
easy is
started.
this?
Yeah, you're right, Kim. How easy is this? And I got a lot of those comments over the years from customers. "Geez, that looks so easy to do." And as I started doing it, luckily I just started doing things for myself to kind of play with it, and I realized that, wow, there's a big learning curve to this thing. And over the years, again, you asked me how did I learn? I learned by the good old hard knocks. I graduated from the University of Hard Knocks with a PhD a few years ago, believe me. And that's how I learned. It just by making mistakes. There were many times that I was in the shop 2-3 days straight, never went home, just simply because I had to have product finished for customers, and they weren't turning out right until I learned and taught myself what I needed to do to make that product right. Because there was nobody to go to. There literally was nobody to go to. And for a period of time, I was doing work for people literally all over the country. I had customers in California, I had them in Arizona, had them from New York, south, east, west, north, I mean, everywhere, because nobody was doing it.
Right.
So I had to learn. And it was just, and that's kind of how I got my education in powder coating. And I've just tried to work the craft when I did have my shop over the years and get as good at, with it as I possibly could. So yeah, that's kind of where I started out and where I came from with this.
Well, that seems like, I mean, it's kind of interesting because, we had Thresh 99 out last week on that previous podcast. If you haven't heard that one, I recommend going
Yes,
back
I did.
to that one.
Yes,
It was an excellent interview because he kind of, and I guess that's kind of where we're going with this podcast is we're kind of filling in the blanks, filling in the backstory to how and where we are today. And I like this story that you just gave us, your story, because it really kind of adds to that, another piece to that puzzle of you being sort of a second generation powder coater, and how you were able, just because you were the only guy, you were able to garner all this business from around the country because there wasn't anybody else they could come to. And I think that helps add a little bit more to where we came from and where we're going. And I want to, before we get much more into talking directly about pricing, and sort of how competition plays a role, I want to preface one of the top books for business out there is a book called Traction. I don't know if anybody out there is an avid reader. I came across this book through a friend, and the book is called Traction. It's by Gino Wickman, and on page 47, they start to go into how people make mistakes. And I started to laugh when I got to this page, because the example that he is giving about the classic mistake that people make is about a couple of guys who got into powder coating. And I was laughing so hard because it's like, here's the number one, you would think it would be mistakes on, I don't know, a restaurant business or, a retail business, because there's so many
Mhm.
of them, right? But
Right.
ironically, the example they give us is about powder coating. And if you're in the business, it's kind of, I giggled when I read it, because it's like, yeah, these people really didn't know what they were doing. Um so basically, let me just set this quote up from the book Traction by Gino Wickman. Um, and they're talking about basically pitfalls that could lead into making, not thinking things through, um, or like the grass is greener on the other side, or
Mm.
uh, they're calling it the surest ways to lose your diamond mind. um,
Mhm.
and this couple guys that had a business, they were getting bored with it, I guess, and they wanted to um, do a transaction with this warehouse. And they owned they were real estate guys, they were real estate investors, right? And so they came across this warehouse, that uh, they wanted to partner with this other guy who came to them, and he goes, hey man, I got all these customers, they want powder coating and everything. And the quote goes, this particular bullet came in the form of a business proposal from a man who wanted this real estate company to buy an industrial building he owns so he could start an engine powder coating company. Well, right there, like engine powder coating company, like a what? But anyways, continuing on, the deal was that he would lease the building from this real estate investor guys, and
Mhm.
would use the proceeds of the sale to build the line and the facilities. The man had customers already lined up. Sounds legit, right? And he just needed to build the company and open its doors. On paper, it was $1 million idea. Excited by the prospect, the co-owners decided to go one further and partner with this guy in the powder coating
Mhm.
business. After investing $1 million of their own money and a year and a half of their time, they eventually closed the business. In the 3 months it had been open, it had lost a total of 300,000. Clearly, it was the worst business
Yeah.
decision of their careers.
Right.
Uh, there was, however, a silver lining. 6 months later, someone stepped in and bought the company for almost as much as they had put in. They got lucky. On the other hand, they still lost a year and a half of time, and focus on their core business, which was real estate. So um,
Right.
I think it's just a funny example of how things can go bad in a powder coating company. Um, and pricing is just obviously one of it. And you and I talked earlier about like the whole startup, um, how like Americans just go into things, they don't really think things through. And we just kind of dive in. That's just our nature as, in our nation, we just do it. And, like
Exactly.
your example of just learning the hard way. But I mean, what do you advise? And I'm going to preface this by saying, like, you know, um, this is just your method, right? This is not,
Correct.
you're
Yeah.
not going to tell people exactly what you're going to, you have consulting. And so we don't want to talk too deeply about it, but, what are some of the things that people should be considering about pricing? You touched on them a little earlier, but maybe we can go a little deeper now. What are those things that we have to think about? Fixed and variable costs, stuff like that.
Exactly. Well, just like you said, I mean, you really have to sit down and honestly look at what your costing is going to be, and that includes, as we were talking about before, your energy costs, your consumable costs, your cost of your equipment, your overhead, your energy. Um, if you have any labor, if you're taking any money out of the business or planning on, and that's something that you really is kind of a no-no in the beginning anyway, because
Right.
you're trying to file it all back in just to keep the operation going. It's all pretty tried and true. But then with the powder coating business, you also have to be aware of, and I think this is probably what happened to those gentlemen that were trying to do the engine coating business. You have to be involved with the brass tacks of your business. You have to be inquisitive. You have to learn. You have to understand what it takes to produce that product, and not just, okay, I've got customers, they're going to send me work, and we're just going to buy the equipment and do it. There's so much more to it, as we were saying earlier, with learning the ins and outs. It just, again, it's pretty basic, but it's something that a lot of folks don't look at when they are starting a business. What's this darn thing going to cost me? And I mean, you need to look, as we were saying before, at everything, because there's something that'll just wheedle you away. Let's take, for instance, redos and rejections.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you figure in how much time it's taking you to do that? You go, okay, I'm making $100 on this project. I've got all my costs covered, but what happens if this project fails? And we know this happens, particularly with powder coating, because you're dealing with a heat source, you're dealing with metals, you're dealing with contaminants and cleaning. So this is a factor that a lot of folks don't build into their costing, which I think is really, really important. I've seen businesses that I've worked with that they'll go, well, how much your rejection, how many parts you reject, or what's the problem with your rejections? I go, I don't know, we're X amount, and maybe 10 a day, 20 a day, 30 a day. And I go, don't you ever look at what that's costing you? No, we don't. We're not really concerned about that. But yet, on the other hand, when you sit down and you evaluate their business with them, they're going, yeah, but we're not making as much money as we should be making. How can we do that? Let's go back and take a look at, how we can avoid these rejections. So again, that's a technical aspect of the business, but it's still a major cost factor that you have.
Yeah, and before we met you, Terry, I had consulted a local guy here in Maui to kind of help Ross. This was in the early days of where we were starting to get bigger projects coming in and stuff, and I kind of was getting after him about underbidding jobs and stuff, because I don't think he was considering redos. I mean, the whole point, it is a confidence game in two ways, right? I mean, it's charging enough, but then also knowing, hey, I don't want to redo this. How am I going to do it right, the first time? And, one of the things that he gave us, tip, I guess, that he gave us is that, if Ross considered the job to be easy, then, obviously he wouldn't have, his spidey sense wouldn't be jumping out at him, and he could just charge, like if he's looking at a project he's never done before, and he wasn't thinking it was going to be hard, to just give him that project. But if he had any doubt, or intuition came to him about this project, to add 10 to 15% on top of the first number that came to him, right? So, if
that's excellent advice.
It is, and I think Ross finally, well, he has his own method to this day, but for those of you out there, you've got that first price that just jumps in your head when you're looking at a project, and then always, I don't want to say doubt yourself, but if you're not sure, add 10 to 15%. And it's easy to do that in your heads. Like if it's 500, add $50, make it 550, and that's just a simple little nugget, I guess, out there to do. Of course, I think some of the other, technical stuff is to get it on paper. like what you're saying, is really you got to get it on paper, which means you have to have some way to track, whether you're using QuickBooks or some other method of accounting. Um, and for those of you that do, start looking at your profit and loss statement, your balance sheet, your cash flow. How do you help your customers, that have that level where you can actually dive into the numbers? I mean, what sort of things, line items do you look at on those reports?
Well, I mean, again, I'm not an accountant, and I, just to kind of preface this, I don't even pretend to be an accountant by any means. Numbers are not my bailiwick. But if customers come to me and they ask me about some of these things, I mean, we'll delve into their, getting back to what we talked about, their basic costs, and looking at, have you put down on paper, what you think your actual costs are. It's so important, to get back to the grassroots. And it's great to have an accountant. It's great to have accounting programs, but in starting, you really need to have that in black and white in front of you and keep tally that on a daily basis. So those are the things that, the questions I'll ask them, how do you know where your costs are at? What is your powder costing you? Do you know how much is going on the product? How long is it taking you? Those type of things.
Yeah.
And if they can't answer those, then I'll go, you may really need to start looking at some of those areas a lot closer. And so many people start into business, and I'm going to take this in two forms. One, just not even considering those things we were just talking about. And others, they'll jump into it both feet, have an accountant, they'll have accounting programs, and they'll have spreadsheets, and they have all this, information that they can garner, but they don't know how to put it there to make sense of it. So there's again, you have to understand your business. You have to understand where your costs are coming from, and that's pretty. Again, I'm repeating myself, that's pretty basic nuts and bolts. You've got to know what your costs are, and believe me, everybody does. When they sit down and look at it, they know where their costs are because they pay the bills every month. So.
Yeah, and when I first started looking at those, scary things that started popping out of my QuickBooks, those reports, I couldn't make sense of them. And I'd actually even done a business class on them. And one of the things that my bookkeeper pointed out to me was, like, look at your cost of goods.
Mm-hmm.
And, because that's just generally everything, right? And if your cost of goods exceeds, I think it's like, you don't want that number to be, that percent to be over 50%. In fact, the lower that number, the lower that number, the better, because that leads, to more profitability in a sense. That's how you would read you compare that to your profit. Now there's a formula for that, but QuickBooks, I know, has a percentage thing you can click in there, and it'll give you that percent right off. It calculates it for you. So ideally, you want your costs, you want that percentage below 25%. And that includes your employee costs and expenses, which is extremely hard to do. And you understand why these industrial coders are just so into the numbers and so technical all the time, because that's how they know their, business is doing well, is looking at the numbers and stuff. And that kind of leads back into what you were saying, is to look at your costs, because that's where you start, where you can start finding that trail to profitability.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly, Kim. And if there's any hard advice I could give somebody starting out, and I know that's pretty much, the audience we're trying to approach today, and that is, as hard as you work on your powder coating and as hard as you work on your techniques, work on your accounting, work on making sure that you're watching your expenses. That goes hand in hand on a daily basis, and you will learn. And as you mentioned earlier, Ross has got a pretty good way of estimating things, and everybody gets to that point. If they pay attention to the numbers, you will get to that point, and it'll just become secondhand in taking a look at an object and taking a look at a problem and going, yeah, this is what it's going to cost. Even if you have to counsel, and that's something else you learn over the years, is how to counsel your customers to kind of get them aware of potential issues that could arise with a product they've given you. So you learn these things over the years, but unless you really pay attention to it, and again, both the powder coating aspect of it, your technical aspect, you've got to also pay attention to that cost and that time factor that you're putting into it, because that's where your money's going.
Yeah, and most of these powder coaters today are bootstrapping, they're scaling, which means they're not really buying equipment until they need it. I know that's how we did it. We didn't buy the whole enchilada Powderworks thing like a lot of them do, and then get into it from there. I don't think that would have worked for us, to be honest with you, because we really didn't even know at the time how much customers were out there for us to even get, because we were so excluded here. But it's there's more, like I said, there's more dissemination or just more information out there for customers to get interested in this finish for their everyday products. And I think that that's helping helping powder coaters get started faster and stuff. But I think this has been great. Trying to figure this out and wade in the weeds a little bit. Let's talk about now competition, because I think that also plays a huge role, and another facet to actually look at it from my wheelhouse, which is your brand, right? Your marketing, your so I'm kind of getting more in the comfortable zone here now with what we're talking about, because when you are faced with competition, direct competition or indirect, knowing that other side can actually help you in your business and how it relates to brand, because when you know the industry from that perspective, you understand now where you fit in the market. And that's what's so powerful with understanding. A lot of guys just don't care, and that's fine. You don't have to care, because you've got your own thing going on, and you're doing just rims, or you're just doing brake calipers, or whatever. You don't care about these other jobs. But for those that want to scale larger, faster, doing these industrial jobs actually can get you there. But knowing what the competition is, charging, helps you get that fit, because maybe you'll find something. So let's talk about, how does competition play a role, competition pricing play a role in your pricing?
Well, I mean, it does play a role, because if you're doing a certain item, a widget, and your competition is bidding on that same widget, you do need to have some semblance of an idea of where they're going with their cost. I mean, you can't be $200 a part when they're $10 a part, just because you say, well, I'm worth this. Well, you might be worth it, but is it worth doing the job for you? So yeah, competition is something that is good and it's bad. I always viewed it as an advantage to me, because people are always looking for coders, especially nowadays. I'm finding this more and more with customers I deal with. And it's always good to know and keep in touch with those customers, even though they're not your customers. Keep in touch with them, because things do arise from time to time. It gives you insight as to what costings are. It gives you an insight as to what your competition is doing for them, and is there an inroad for you to jump in and grab some business from these folks. So it's a cost thing. It's understanding where your competition is at, type of thing. But yes, definitely you need to have an idea of where your competition is at charging, whether again it be rims, and I've seen all kinds of crazy prices all over the place on those, to widgets, to industrial things.
So
Yeah.
would you recommend like calling your competition to ask or pretending
Well,
I mean, I don't know, how would you do that? Like, or would you call
well,
the
yeah.
customer and say,
No,
hey,
somebody.
can I, yeah, I mean, that gets a
Yeah, a
little
lot of
tricky,
times
right?
you can call. Yeah, I mean, calling is they're not about to give you the time of day. But I would just suggest setting up appointments. Just take some time during the week. And I know everybody's busy, but if you want to expand your business and make it grow, you have to develop a customer base. You can't just do a certain item, because that certain item is going to dry up. So you have to develop a pipeline, a customer base per se. Just even if you take a day every 2 weeks and set up appointments with people and say, hey, I'd like to come in and talk to you about my services. You start learning a lot and you start developing relationships with these customers. And it may take a couple of times, but you start learning where your competition is at through those discussions with the sit downs, face to faces. I've always been a face to face person with folks. I'd much rather deal with them that way, because you know where they're coming from, they know where you're coming from. So if you've got that wherewithal in your personality to do it, I highly suggest that's how you uncover the information that's out there. It's really the best way to do it.
So kind of more like a long game
Yeah,
perspective.
really, it is a
Yeah.
long game. Yeah, they're unless somebody is, you hear through the pipeline that, hey, XYZ manufacturing is really having a hard time with their powder coater. You may want to go see them.
Right.
And that comes about from time to time. Those are terrific situations, but you need to develop that customer relationship part of your business also. And you learn a lot, and it does take a period of time. Believe me, in the first month, year and a half, you're not going to develop all of that overnight. It takes time, but if you're in the business to establish a long-term business, that's the way you have to do it, to develop your baseline of customers.
Yeah, I think I mean, just to even be ready. So if that does happen, you have something, that you can present, or have some semblance of getting ready for something like that to happen in your life, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
And just always trudging forward with your marketing plan, or and how that plays into revenues, but go ahead. What were you going to say about that?
No, and I do know, I want to throw in the fact that, I mean, nowadays social media plays such a big part in helping businesses develop, but it still comes down to that personal relationship. And you're going to find that, especially when you get into the industrial markets and commercial markets, and wanting to delve into that. It may get you some awareness, but that personal contact is really ultimately what is going to develop a strong customer base and a good, reliable customer base to work with over the years.
Yeah, it's true. And that's exactly what we've been sort of lately up against, is that industrial job, the ones that bring you the big bucks, are much harder to get. We can, and the problem isn't that they're not out there. I think they are out there. The problem,
yes, they are.
Yeah, the problem has been for us is getting in front of these people, because they are so busy. They don't, unless you're doing a lunch and learn kind of presentation kind of thing. And they're professionals, so they've got their own way. If we're talking, I'm talking like contractors, architects, these are some of the targets that we have here that I've been trying to get in front of. Either that or you're spending a bazillion dollars in front of at some builder conference or something like that. There's that approach too that we've tried to, but you're paying a lot of like membership fees, and you're still an outsider, right? So
Right. Right.
that's how it's here. Been here for us, but it might be a little different on the mainland. I don't know, just because it's so much bigger. I can't imagine, but it's kind of, well, up until COVID, that's been our kind of where we've been going, is just trying to get in front of these people and doing these presentations, and they still need education because they've got their own thing that they learned in college, or their own method or way of doing things in their business, and they haven't really thought outside of that. So it's not just getting in front of them, it's now convincing them how wonderful powder coatings are. um,
Exactly.
but I think having that's how the brand kind of, for me, that's how the brand kind of has started, is just trying to get in front of these people to talk to them about it. And I think once they hear about it, they're like, wait, what? Other than that, it's been like a mistake that's happened, and now they're under a deadline and they've reached out to us, and we're now able to help them solve their problem. And that's usually been the two ways that we've gotten these larger, because they've heard it from someone else that we did this job and whatever
Hmm.
reputation and stuff. But I think we're right. I mean, like I think we've presented a few different ways that, uh, we've even called a competition, and asked them how much they're charging, and then trying to assess where they're coming from, or why do customers go to them? It has been kind of like, you know, helping us figure out where our placement is in the market, which has also helped us with our pricing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a total awareness. It's a total awareness. Yeah, and I always started off talking about pricing, but it all comes back to this, and without proper pricing, you don't make any money. But all these factors are involved in a total awareness of your business and of the community that you're going after to garner work. Yeah, it's not just buying an oven, buying a gun, and saying, okay, I'm in business, I'm going to start coating things. There's so much more to it. And nowadays, it's maybe a little more difficult because there are so many places popping up. But being aware, developing good customer service, understanding where your basic costs are at, and then working your craft and working and working and working. And I'm going to say this above all: be as honest as you possibly can to your customers. Be honest with them, educate them, let them know what you're doing, and let them know why you're doing it, because that develops such a relationship that just goes miles. All you have to do is make one goof up or fib to a customer and have it get out, and boy, all your hard work goes right down the drain. So honesty is still the best policy.
Yeah, and I think at least a lot of the quality custom coders that I talk to out there generally are humble, honest, hardworking people.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, that same kind of personality trait makes them, to a fault, sometimes they undercharge and stuff. And so I hope that, this is a great way to kind of wrap up our talk, because it kind of leads back to that, how to get paid what you're worth. And, for some of us, I think what you said too, an awareness, having an awareness about it. Okay. It's sometimes not easy to work math and numbers in your business. A lot of people shy away from it. Some people are just naturally good at it. But either way,
Hmm.
um, it's just becoming aware of it and trying to hopefully use some of the things that we've talked about today to implement in your business, uh, to utilize, so that you can at least address, your pricing. So it's not necessarily adding 1 and 1, equals 2 all the time. It's just kind of having that hard conversation with yourself, you know, or your wife who's complaining, or your girlfriend or whatever, right?
It's a good way to put it, Kim. Yes.
Right. Because I'm usually the one going, you didn't charge enough, whatever, and stuff. And so it's a great way to kind of wrap up, is just to have that awareness, have that conversation with yourself, try to put some numbers together, reach out to Terry, if you can't. A little plug for you, Terry. I don't know if you need another plug, but you're so busy already. But, there are consultants out there. So if you do, reach out to a bookkeeper, throw them a couple $100 to help you, get an accountant. These things do help, but it is up to you to do it. So would you agree, Terry?
Oh, I fully agree. I mean, and again, numbers don't lie, and it is difficult for a lot of folks. I mean, it was difficult for me in the beginning, both of my commercial painting business and also especially when I started the powder coating business. But you just have to force yourself to look at that evil notebook that's sitting there on your desk that has all that information in it, because it's so important. It's so important.
Yeah, and I think that's for me too. Just one final thought is I'm not naturally that way either with numbers, but I forced myself to sit down and start to look at them. And
Mm-hmm.
you know what the thing is once I got into it, I really got into it because the numbers tell a story, right? That's what they
They
do.
sure do.
And it's all of it. It's the competition and knowing where your place is in the market, and then it's all these numbers, and then trying to tease out that story behind it, and how to go about doing that. And everyone's, it's all basically the same, but I hope to have a deeper conversation maybe later about that. Maybe get an expert in here on that. What kind of numbers do you look at and stuff like that. But I think for the most part, from a basic point of view, you kind of know what they are. You've simply brought them to this conversation today about powders and your fixed costs and some of the stuff, versus pricing. And it's all
Mm-hmm.
been captured here today, and stuff. So do you want to throw out how people can get a hold of you if they have any questions?
Yeah, if they do, they can contact me through my email at TEPOWDER. I've had that forever, at MSN.com. That's TE Powder and MSN.com. Or my phone number is 815-545-7709. I'd
That's
be happy to
awesome.
speak with anybody.
Yeah, Terry, you're awesome. Thank you. I mean, you've certainly helped us think a lot of things through while we've been scaling as fast as we have. And I certainly appreciate you on the show today, because I think we've definitely given people some food for thought. And I hope to have you back again sometime soon, maybe talking about some other stuff.
I appreciate that, Kim. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. So now we're going into the second half of the interview, or part 2 of pricing and getting what you're worth, or what is your worth. For this part of the section, we've decided to invite Ross, owner of Maui Powder Works, to the show. Ross, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing good. Welcome.
How's that dining room table? Is it working for you?
It's square.
Okay. Well, why don't you just get right into it? I mean, tell us your journey about how that you took to get to where you are today with pricing and the confidence that you have to charge what you do.
Well, obviously, I come from multiple business background. We had our painting business before that, and that was a great mechanism for price discovery, because we were doing all these jobs with the hotels. I ran a sailboat company before that, with employees and taking tourists out on rides, and we had a lot of maintenance involved with that vessel, and we learned a lot about the cost of doing maintenance. And when I was actually very young, I had a paper route, so I've kind of been in the entrepreneur state my whole life. But as far as price discovery goes, and for powder coating, it was a little more kind of like, oh my goodness, what am I going to charge, and how do I go about charging this? And the best way I can say at doing this is basically look at the job, figure out how much time it's going to take, and how much supplies you're going to burn doing that job. Once you understand just the basic least common denominator part, then you can start figuring out your price structuring. It just didn't happen overnight. I did call around and figure out what other people are charging, and I was like, going, how come this is so expensive and how come this is so cheap? I couldn't quite put it all together. And, obviously over the time I went, oh, that's why that's expensive. And that's just too cheap. That guy doesn't know what he's doing,
Right. And I think there is some homework that the powder coaters that are getting started in the industry have to do. I mean, it's just part of the process of, if you want to get into this business, that's just one of the things you do. The more pieces of the puzzle you can put together, I think Terry and I went over this briefly, the more you can get confident about the perspective or the entrance to market is for your specific business, And I think we have a good example of that right here in Maui, where we have a powder coater near us that specializes in hotel furniture. And he doesn't necessarily want all the crazy stuff that comes into our shop every day. I mean, he doesn't want that variation or that variable, or that, he's just locked into what he does. This works for him and he's okay with that. You want to get into that at all? I mean, it really helped us determine that.
Yeah. Basically, like you said, they do Levi furniture, and that's their business model, and they are really good at it. And, I do an occasional lanai set here and there, but I hate doing it because it takes a lot of time. And here comes what I'm talking about. You have to figure out how long it takes for you to do your job. And, if you start doing the numbers, you go, holy crap, I'm not making any money doing this. It's that simple. So I stay away from things that are too laborious and take too much time to do. And I try to stay on things that keep me in the zone of making money. So like rims, I've got that down. I've got those things down. And
yeah,
I can basically do a set of 4 rims in 4 hours. Mm-hmm. And, we charge basically $500. So if you break that down, that's $125 an hour. So
right.
That's okay. That's not my actual target rate. I'd rather be at about $150 an hour.
Right.
I feel for the amount of stuff we have in the shop that we're providing, we're like a high-end welder basically. And, because of the cost of things that we have, like the media, the stripper, and being that we're here in Hawaii, and to get these things here is so expensive that I should be at least charging $150 an hour. And
right.
So you basically can look at it that way. That's one way to look at it. Say, how long is it going to take me to do this job? So, here I go off the model of rims. You got 4 rims. It's going to take, 4 hours of time. You could break that time down. You got an hour to strip, and you have the amount of stripper you're using. Now, of course, if you have it like in a containerized vessel and you're reusing it, you have a time decay of that. So you can keep reusing it, but eventually you have to re-add to it and add more. So, that's a hard cost to figure out what that is. But, you haven't, but let's just look at it time wise, an hour to strip. And then you have basically, let's just say 2 hours to sandblast and then rinse and then tape. And then from there, you got about an hour to coat them. So there you have it, 4 hours. So,
right. So you should start with how much you want to start making per day or per hour is what you're saying.
Yeah, you got to have almost 2 outlooks. And one outlook is the hourly and or the job. Just look at the job. What am I doing? And, a good thing to go look, if you're new to business and you're new to powder coating, I highly recommend checking out that show, American Restoration, on TV. That guy is his name Dale. It's amazing how he basically goes, it's going to take me to do this long to do it. Going to have paint. This sandblast is this, and da 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 da. So your price is $7,000. He'll say something like that, and you just go, wow, he just rattled that right off his head. And it's pretty amazing how he does that. But he's been doing it for so long, he can do that. I've gotten to the point I can rattle it off pretty much quickly in my head also. But I have to put pen and paper to it because there's hidden costs, and you have to be very careful because that's what can get you in the end.
Yeah. And so sometimes it's sort of a little bit of a confidence game and a math game. It's about how good you are about adding numbers in your head. But no powder coater should feel like, I guess my thing is I know when you have a customer staring at you in the face and they're wanting you to give them a price right then and there. No one should feel like they should have to do that at all. And if they do feel compelled to do so, either already know that going in, you're going to feel that downward pressure of like, they want you to charge less or but I challenge all these coders out there to actually charge more and see what happens. That's the challenge, because until you say, well, yeah, I want this much for this, and don't even give them a reason. Just say, I'm going to do this job for this much and see what your customer says. I mean, yeah, it's possible that they may say that it's too much and they're going to go somewhere else. Then fine, go do that. But you have to constantly push the roof up, especially when you're learning and trying out new things. And when you've nailed a good finish, you can do it again. So I don't know. What do you think of that advice?
Oh, I think it's great. The best advice I have ever been given in my life was given by an old friend of mine. And he basically said that when you're charging and you give the price to the client, he should grumble a little bit. He should basically go, that's kind of, I don't know. Okay, but you know what? I'm going to do it. That when that happens, you're charging perfect. When you're not charging enough, you go, okay, it's going to be this much for the job, and they go, sure, no problem. And you're like, damn, I should, I should have charged more, because you want them to kind of go,
think.
Just a little bit of hesitation. And if they're not hesitating, you're not charging enough. And that's a good
point. Very good point. Yeah.
Barometric pressure model there.
Right. Exactly.
But I did have, I'm going over the hourly, but I don't look at that pretty much anymore. That when I first started, that's how I looked at it, and I was like, okay, this is what I need to charge, and to get the pricing. But then after doing this for so many years, I realized this oven makes this much an hour, this oven makes that much an hour, and that other oven makes that much an hour. And I've learned that by looking at how I run my shop, I can charge more or less for it. And when I get a big call for a big job, I immediately go, okay, well, this job's going to be done in this oven. And I know this oven can run at this rate. And this is what I'm charging. And then what I do, instead of figuring out, I go, well, how many batches is this going to take to do this job?
Right.
And then from there, I come up with my price.
Yeah.
And of course, I add in the powder, the time of taping, racking too. You got to, some of these
Especially
jobs. Oh my God!
Yeah.
You can spend 3 hours just racking up just one run in the oven.
Yeah.
And so you have to take that into account. You do, because it will bite you in the end if you don't.
So what we're talking about is batch pricing. Which I'm not sure how many people do that now. I think we use it in two different ways. We use it like how you just described, in how you get your, like if you've got a big call and you've got to throw out an estimate to a client, it's sometimes easier to break things down by the part, or by, instead of linear inches or feet or whatever. We never really have prescribed too much to the linear feet. And I know they do it in the industrial thing, and that's different. Those people have all kinds of math equations and spreadsheets and formulas for that stuff. But it's hard for the batch coder or the custom coder to do it that way. We just don't have that availability unless they came from that, business to begin with. But if you're just starting off as a batch coder, or you've only ever been a custom or bespoke coder, it's like the batch thing or the per day pricing goal or the per hour goal seems to be the best. And the way we use the batch pricing is when we're really quoting large jobs, like gates and railings, or like gutters and metal strips and stuff like that. We use the batch quote to counter the QuickBooks quote, right? So we use it as a double check system to make sure that we are actually coming into, because I do my side, right, which is the QuickBooks side. We have our estimated pricing in there, and then you do it yourself on your own, and then we do a comparison, and then we see how close we are. And a lot of times we're right on.
Yeah. And you basically take all your pricing of the batch for the oven, and how many times you're going to do it, how much powder you're going to use, and so forth with supplies. And you basically take that number and you divide it literally by how many linear feet you're doing or whatever, and you can come up with the linear foot price that way too. And we have found that we've actually come under nation standards for linear pricing. I've done, wow. And it's like you sit there and go, well, maybe we should add more into here, and I look at it, I go, that's right. That's a real estimate we gave them, and I stick to it, and it always works out. It always works out. Now, there's also, another segment to this as far as what you should charge, and this is more of a macro view, and because we've been talking more of a micro view, breaking everything down. So, and this is very important because a lot of people don't look at this, and every business needs to have a goal which they need to achieve. And, you might say, hey, I want to make, $200,000 this year. Well, how much money do you have to do in a day to do $200,000 in a year? And those are things you need to put on your board and your wall in your office, and say, listen, I want to achieve this number. How do I go about that? Well, if you're working 5 days a week, you got to look at that. And, that number could, when we first started, our first goal was $500 a day. And, we met that, and then we went, well, we need to do $1,000 a day. And then, we met that.
Yeah, we blew through that one.
And then we said, we need to do $2,000 a day. And we did that a few times. And of course, now we got COVID-19.
Yeah, we got COVID-19 right now.
And
exactly.
So things are.
But I think you're right. I mean, you gotta whatever it is, you got to make enough so that you can cover your business expenses and then still put food on the table and pay your mortgage and your rent or whatever. You know what I mean? I mean, I think that we've covered that pretty well between you and Terry and stuff. But I want to divert just a little bit off of this. Just another perspective, I guess. It's not really diversion, but, because there are customer expectations and then there are deliverables, right? And sometimes you and I get into it. Yes, we're a husband and wife team and we argue all the time about practically everything. And
healthy arguing.
Well, we'd like to say that, but it can get kind of rowdy at times. But, because, and here's where I'm getting at, because this is what, you are such a perfectionist. And as many of the coders that listen to this show are. And it's just, you can't help it. It's your nature. You don't want something to go out unless it's absolutely 100% spotless, perfect, no flaws, whatever. And then there's the kind of pricing and then there's the price that the customer's willing to pay, like the top dollar, right? And this is another thing that I'm not sure how many people out there are doing, but you've got to understand that there's only so much your audience or your customer or your target group is going to pay based on your geographical location, your brand, and your product.
Right.
And sometimes you go above and beyond with this, and it gets me kind of riled because they're still only going to pay this price. And I know you do it just because that's who you are. And of course, that's helped us in ways that, reputation wise has preceded our company. But there is, you got to keep in mind that, without making yourself so crazy with the perfection side, you still got to think back, okay, is my customer going to be okay if there's one little dimple in there or one little bump or, and that's where I think the subtlety of understanding that and being okay with what you're delivering or what you're pushing out the door really, really comes to it. So are you going to be that super neurotic, if you, powder coater where it has to be 100% perfect? Because if you are, you should be charging top dollar.
Yes, definitely.
If you're crossovers like us, where we do so many different kinds of jobs and we're just scaling big, little, small, old, new, whatever, and in between, we need to price becomes a timing thing, because there's only so much time we can spend on rims, and it's not out of the spectrum of all the products we do or jobs we do. I'd rather take a bigger gate job, railing job, because we make so much more on that, and it's so much easier to do than a restoration job or something like that. So do you want to add did I kind of cover that pretty well, or I'd like you to add into that if you can?
Well, I think you said that correctly. Obviously anything that's new fabrication that's coming in your shop is so much easier to deal with, so it's quicker, it's faster. You're going to get it done. When you're dealing with restoration and you're tearing something back, taking stripping and sandblasting, and, you're spending way more time, and there's only so much somebody will pay for their restoration. And a lot of times I tell people, you know what, I can do this for you. It's going to cost you this much. And they go, whoa. And I go, yeah, it's a lot of time. So maybe you should instead of throwing good money after bad, just buy new, and, you just have to kind of send them on your way. And, in all honesty, it's the right thing to do, because you're allowing your schedule to be more open to the better paying jobs.
Right.
But,
exactly.
these are different times now. So, like I'll take a job I won't necessarily want to do, and I might negotiate a little bit on it just because I know we got to keep the numbers up. So, those are things you have to keep in mind too. And, you don't want to be out of business. You want to be in business. And, you got to answer your phones. That's the most important thing. And then you have to reply to the customer quickly and responsively, and get that quote out. And it's not easy coming up with price discovery if you just started doing this.
Right. And for those that are sort of on the shy side or kind of procrastinate getting estimates out, my advice there is to really get yourself out of that ditch and do it. Don't procrastinate getting job quotes out. Do it as fast as you possibly can, and challenge yourself to do that first before you even start powder coating for the day. I mean, just do it, because I'm telling you, a lot of times it's the first estimate that they get that they go for, because it's the first one out that they get. And a lot of the time these jobs they're just trying to get it out or done, or they don't want to, sometimes they're waiting for 3 bids. Sometimes they just can go with the one. I don't know, but do that first. Do not procrastinate getting estimates out. That's number one advice. I think the other thing too, like you touched on with the restoration too, is, a lot of this stuff people inherit, or they want to restore it, or it's an antique that their mother left them, or, whatever. And they get it for free, yet they want to restore it, but they won't pay for the restoration because they got it for free, right? Like their mindset on that is so off kilter, right? I mean, I had that happen to me in the refinishing business with the furniture. And she's like, I got this for free from my great aunt. Why would I want to pay all this money for you to restore it? Okay, definitely not your customer, right? Get out the door, go away,
Yeah, and that's a very important thing you just hit. Know your customer. Who is your customer? Who do you want it to be your customer? Because that's very important. We know who our customer is, and we basically say, okay, this is our customer. We are going to attract that customer here, and that's who we want. So if you start bringing in those customers that you don't want, oh God, and then it's just like an eternal loop. They'll tell their friends, and then you're like, no, I don't want to be doing this.
You don't want to be that guy.
I don't do iron furniture. No, we don't do that here.
Yeah, don't be that guy, because you do, and it's just this endless cycle. But I think that's really where we should end, because that's the confidence, right? That's the confidence that you have when you are doing pricing. So we've touched on the math part, but we've also touched on the confidence part.
Well, it's confidence, but you got to look at it hourly, daily, monthly, yearly. And once you figure those projections out, what you want to do, then you can break it down to a daily cost, and go, okay, this is what I need. Or not a cost, but a goal. So you're like, I need to make this much a day in order to make this much in a month, in order to make this much in a year. And, it's real important. I learned that from my father. My father taught me that. And it's like, it was also awesome advice. I mean, I used to go into his office as a young teenager and look at these charts and just go, wow. And, I was just impressed by that. And we have taken that and do that in our office. And that's what we do. And it's an incentivizer, because you see the numbers on the wall and you go, okay, we got to do more, to make this happen, and if you don't see that, then you're not aware of it. And, and that's all part of pricing. And it's like, oh, well, if I just charged, $10 more, what does that do to the end game? Oh boy, You'd be surprised what it does. Right. I run into this all the time. People charging, I'm charging $90 an hour to sandblast. I go, you're what? I go, how much does it cost to fill up your pot?
Right.
And then they go, they don't think of those things. And I'm just like, I'm like, whoa, and that comes, to buying equipment. How much does it cost to run that piece of equipment? When we were looking at that dustless blaster, after I did the math on it, I was like, this is insane. No way. And
apologies to anybody that owns one of those. Sorry.
I said,
we nearly, I don't know what's the word. We nearly missed that one.
No, it looks great. It looks good on the video. You're like, you get all, all excited. You see that thing on the video. You're like, yeah, man, I want to get that. And then you start doing the math on that thing. You're like, whoa, boy,
yeah,
I'll run you right out of business.
Right. Yeah. And, but I think there's some stuff that I found on the internet that I wanted to bring up really quick. And they're just 4 points that I just wanted just to do a couple, things back and forth with you. And that is, number one, everyone has a different starting point. And I think that plays into pricing and confidence. I mean, that's no brainer there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to basically figure out what you're worth. And, what is that? What is that number? Mechanics are, a good mechanic will be $100, $120 an hour. Just a normal run-of-the-mill mechanic's going to be $35 to $60 an hour. And it's the same thing with powder coaters. There was, remember that time we went to Oahu and the company is no longer in business, but we went over and checked out their facility, and I went, oh, no wonder they're charging $50 a rim. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, they were literally operating in the open air. I was like,
dirt floors. Yeah. It was,
and
okay,
I was like,
we get it. But we went over there to look there just to kind of go, oh, now we get it, right? So now you got it, and now you realize, oh, why we're so much different or better, right? And you realize,
exactly,
but you have to go and do it. You do,
Well, if you're paying for a nice building and you have nice equipment, that is money that is out of your pocket to do that, and you have to refill that pocket. So you have to charge properly for that.
Right.
You can't give it away. And,
but everybody starts at a different point, and everybody, like you look at Roro, you look at Black Label, you look at Velocity, all these guys, they didn't start yesterday. They started many years ago. And, to be like them overnight isn't going to happen, but you have to just keep doing you,
Well, that's our story. We started, remember, we started with the stupid little hot coat gun from Eastwood, and we had the infrared heat lamps. I mean, I didn't even have a blast cabinet, when I first started.
I don't even know what you're talking about there. I know now. I mean, yeah, I know it was pretty grim, but we started, right? We did something. We started,
Yeah. So
nobody wants to remember that we started like that. No, but yeah, that's
I remember how I started. I remember every excruciating decision and every hard turn where I had to make a left or a right, and I said, this is what I'm doing. And that's unfortunately businesses like that, and we are making decisions as of this moment.
Yeah, tell them the good news.
Okay, powder coaters out there, we just secured a new building. We're moving our building from the west side of the island to the central part of the island, which will give us more business. For us, this is a great move. We've been wanting to do this for many years. It just happens that, with the COVID-19, it's just been a real pain in the butt. But yes, we are making that move, and it's going to be a good move. We're very excited. Other good news, we have the patent coming out for us on our secret weapon. I'll just leave it at that. And
we just filed that. Yeah, lots of good stuff.
Yeah, good things. So, even in bad times, you can always have a positive outlook, and that's another thing. Always, it's easy to get negative. I mean, you have to be real, but try to keep that positive outlook and good things.
And we're going to have. I'm setting something up with Kevin Corson from PCI. Powder Coating Institute hopefully in the next week or two, and he's going to go over some highlights from the annual meeting that we attended regarding powder coating and the state of powder coating and where we're at. So I'm going to eke out as much of those details as I can from the meeting to help everybody out there know where the industry is going right now and stuff. But so here's number 2. Everyone is unique and has a different level of talent. So find out what your talent is. If you like doing lanai furniture, we call it lanai furniture, but outdoor furniture. If that's your bag, then and you do really well at that, do that. Like be that guy. If your rims or your brakes or brake calipers, do that. It just everybody. Not everybody's going to be good at everything.
No, and certain things you have to be super like perfectionist. And we've realized that like with rims and stuff, you have to be at that 98 to 99% perfection rate. You have to be that way, and that's why you have to charge. If you don't charge properly, it's gonna bite you in the butt, because you're gonna end up redoing and stuff. You almost have to price in the fact that you're gonna redo a rim here and there.
Right.
Another perfectionist thing is like guns. If you're doing like people that want their barrels powder coated, and in the beginning I did this a few times, and I realized, wow, this crowd is super perfectionist, and it's like,
right.
Whoa, and it's like I have to slow down so much to do this that I would have to charge such an exorbitant rate. It's not feasible. And at that moment, that's where I realized we're not doing that.
Right. And the point is to train the customer market up, right? I mean, to let them know how awesome powder coatings are, so that they will pay more for them. Right.
Yeah,
Just a general
and there's
setting.
people that are specialized, and that's what I was getting at. So, I don't specialize in that. That's not my deal. And if somebody comes in and say, I want this done, I'll say, okay, it's going to cost this much is what it is. And if I have, because, guns are very difficult because of all the oil and stuff. And you just, it's just one of those things. Like, it's like you're literally powder coating in WD-40. And it's like, oh my God, fisheye central. So anyway, but there is people that have more time, and they're basically, I'm going to do this out of my house, and I've got this, and I don't need to buy the big oven, and I don't need this, and I just got a little tabletop, bench blaster, and their costs are considerably lower than my costs, and they can do that, and they can spend the time and provide a living for themselves, and that's the thing. So if you're coming from that angle, at home guy, you're going to have lower costs. You can bring everything down and charge less. It's just the big guys out there are going to charge more because we have to, and but also we've been doing it for a long time. We're going to bang it out fast, and it's going to look good.
So go ahead. Sorry.
We just have the years of experience, and there's nothing that can compete against a guy who's been doing it for 20 years versus a guy who's been doing it for a year. Right. There is just no way.
Well, think about this though. Like, I mean, a lot of guys that are starting powder coating companies today do have that experience. They've just been working for someone else too. So, that's, what we're talking about is, if you've been you've been working at a line coat system for a while, and now you're going to get into custom coating. I mean, there's going to be some learning curve there and stuff.
And that's a mental thing. That's a mental thing. So what you just described is a mental thing. Basically, the guy's been working for somebody his whole entire time, and now he wants to be the owner. And, has he been making the bids? We don't know, So if he's not comfortable with that, that's entrepreneur 101. You have to be comfortable with that. And that's where I stated off at the very beginning. You have to run a lemonade stand first.
Right. Yeah.
If you can't run one of those, you're asking for trouble. And basically you need to get help or have a mentor mentor.
Yeah. Like get someone like Terry, who was on earlier. Terry's awesome. And he's such a wealth of knowledge. I mean, we just barely tapped into what he knows. And he's got a really good rapport. He really gets one-on-one with you. He listens. I'm not trying to plug Terry just because that's what he does, but he certainly has been helpful to us. We do use him. But I mean, I brought him on just for the pricing part, but he helps so many different kinds of, he helps custom coders and line coders alike. So he's just your man, but let's get on to number 3, because this one really is key for us. The resources available to you and another person are different. So that definitely plays into us for sure, because it's all about the shipping over here in Hawaii. And anytime you're buying a new piece of equipment, you got to cost in that the shipping's going to cost just as much as the equipment itself.
Yes. So there's lots of different pricing between the equipment itself. I mean, you can go from one sandblast pot that's $2,000 or sub $2,000, and then the brand up is almost 5,000, and you're like, well, why is this so much different? So you need to figure out why that's different, and is it going to mean that you're going to be operating at a lower cost? Because in the long run, something that's more expensive might operate at a lesser cost. So you need to understand those things. I'm trying to think of some other thing. Oh, like media, for example. Garnet. We've came to the conclusion for us. It's the cheapest medium to use for sandblasting. But in the mainland, you can use that Star Bright, and you can use coal slag. There's various bead. You can use all of those, glass bead, aluminum oxide, and you can get those for a lot cheaper. But for us, it was Garnet. It's the cheapest, and that's what we use.
Right.
But those are things you got to keep in mind, and what works best and what's quickest. And that is the most important, what's quickest. And
definitely. I mean, but equipment, no doubt. I think everybody knows at this point how important equipment is in the powder coating, to keep your game going and improve your game too. I mean, you're not going to, I mean, maybe some people will be yelling at me for this one, but you start to see all these beautiful, shots on Instagram on wheels and calipers and all kinds of automotive and motorcycle parts and stuff like that. Guys, they're not using the Eastwood gun to get that. Okay. They're using the top of the line, Gema, Wagner, whatever. I mean, they're using those top of the line guns. I mean, they just are. So if you think you're going to get that level with your little $200 gun, it's not going to happen,
Yeah, that was mind boggling when I went from the cheapo gun to the Wagner. I was like, and that was the old EPG 207 model, and I was just like, wow. And then of course when I bought the Wagner,
you didn't even know how to use that thing.
I was like, wow. Yeah, I know. I spent many times in the message boards figuring out where the settings needed to be,
Yeah.
And those are. And nowadays it all comes prepackaged, buttoned. You just hit the button and go. It's like, yeah, all right, this is great. And but yeah, you get what you pay for. There's definitely a $5,000 powder coating gun is going to shoot way different than a $1,000 gun. I can tell you that. But that was something I'd like to do, is do a comparison, shoot some video one day of all the different various guns.
That would be cool. Okay, yeah. Gema, Wagner, Piccolo. What's the other one? The cool cat.
Well, there's Norson. Yeah. And there's many others, but
give you our address.
But I wasn't trying to name names, but you just did.
Yeah, I did. I'm a troublemaker today. Okay, here's the last one. Just know that there is always someone going to be better than you. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's true.
Yes, and also, I could expand on that too, is also know when you're wrong. and make a mistake, So, there's always going to be a better fish out there, So, and when that happens, you just go, well, it's time to up my game here. What do I need to do that? And some people are just more predispositioned for this business than other people are. So,
True.
you kind of have to be in the right mindset to begin with. And then from there, just keep elevating your game, but this is getting off. We're talking about price.
Well, you definitely like to, you almost have to be, you like to get burned by the oven at 400 degrees. That's one qualification. You definitely like to get shocked every now and then with electricity. Those are just some of you like to get chemical burns. Those are just some of the things you have to put up with in this business. But you're right. And either you're either going to be that person that's going to be the better person. And if you're not, it's okay, I guess is what it's okay to not be the next row or the next whatever. I mean, like it's, there's plenty room to be just the best at who you are or what you do,
Yes. Yeah. So, and you got to understand what are your limitations? I have my limitations. There's certain things I just don't want to do just because I know. Because and for me, it's not that I don't want to do it because I can do it. It's just, to me, it's just not feasible in the cost to do it. And,
cost or time. Or your time, because how long it's going to take. I
watch these guys, do the taping and wiping, and it's just like, wow, you're talking about almost, an hour and a half to 2 hours on each rim, and it's like, whew, your cost just went right up doing that, and that's just for the taping and the wiping, and then you got all the other costs involved. So, it's like, at what point do you got to charge and will the customer accept that? That's the thing. So, and there's, it's just one of those things. So it becomes a labor of love, and there's people that do that. But I won't, because I know I have to make money at this. So, when it comes too much of a labor of love, I kind of like, okay, and I'll just tell the client, I can do this, but it's going to cost this much. And then they go, oh. And I go, yeah, it's just because of the time. So, but I can do this, and I always have basically another scenario for them to make them go, oh, well, yeah, I like that. Let's do that. And you're like, yeah, So
yeah, you can always change their mind.
Don't limit yourself, but always have another street for them, an avenue for them to travel down.
That's a good point. Very good point. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's, I think that's a great way to end. I didn't think we were going to be able to talk about this much and cover so much. I might have to turn this into 2 episodes because, Terry had some valuable points, but we've also covered some other really interesting, different perspectives and thought-provoking, maybe stuff that just people haven't had the chance to even think about because they're so busy powder coating, but you do sometimes have to take some time to slow down and invest in yourself. And one of the things to do is to invest in your pricing, invest in your confidence and do take a temperature of where you're at, and is there an opportunity for you to improve your pricing, increase your pricing, or are you just happy where you're at? All right. Well, that concludes the episode of pricing and getting what you're worth. I hope you've enjoyed everything you've heard today and you're able to improve where you're at. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And of course, always send us comments, questions. If you've got an idea for a new podcast, direct message us anywhere, everywhere. Email us info@Maui Powder Works. And I hope you have a great day out there. Take care.